Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My apologies for the short glitch in technology. I have 15 minutes in which to introduce to you a concept that has taken 10 years to actually build, but I think learning of 30 years in terms of our democracy. Now, if you look at what I'm about to present, you'd have probably seen bits and pieces of it in a number of different organizations, a number of different positions that you hold. But I think the core to what it is that I'm about to present is highly innovative, it's new, it's forward-thinking, and I'm sure it's going to excite you. They always say that the proof is in the eating. So the proof is in, and I will announce that later, in the demo, in the testing, in the piloting, or in what you want to do in terms of the touch and feel of it. We've gone through 30 years of democracy, and the question that we've always asked, have we achieved the intent of what we wanted to do 30 years ago? So when 1994 happened, did we actually achieve what we wanted to do? And if you look at the state of municipal finance, the state of local government, I think quite simply, lots of us would say, no, we haven't. The question then arises, why hasn't it happened? And we could put a number of reasons to it. But I don't think I'm here today to talk about the reasons. I'm here to say, what are the next steps? So as an example, if you look at the history, when we started in 1994, we put together lots of pieces of legislation to say how we're going to govern, how we're going to manage, what is the state of finances. And you'll recall, when we did the white paper as an example, 70% of the revenue was supposed to come from local government, own revenue. Today, there are a number of municipalities that are highly grant dependent. So we put in place various pieces of legislation, and I think at that time when we were putting pieces of legislation together, we can all sit here and say there was no internet around. When you spoke about things like AI, when you spoke about things like ML, machine learning, etc., and data analytics and business intelligence, those things didn't exist. So pieces of legislation were written at a point in time to actually address an issue at that point in time. 30 years down the line, what I can stand here and say, that process is being re-looked at. And at the center of that process, if we haven't figured that out yet, is a lot of tech, a lot of innovation, a lot of technology sitting behind it. So when we talk smart cities, smart meters, there's things happening behind it. And the question is, what is that thing that's happening behind it? And how do you pull it together from a sustainability perspective? So just to note, these pieces of legislation, those processes have started, we're part of that process. At the center of that is a lot of technology. Now, I'm not going to go through the challenges. We drive the roads, we look at load shedding, we look at water issues, whether it's parks and gardens, etc. These things are there, and these things will continue to be there. So the question then arises, do we still want to talk about this 30 years from now, or do you want to actually be the talk of that 30 years from now? Now, I'm not sure how many of accountants are sitting in this room. I'm not sure how many engineers are sitting in this room, or if there's any doctors sitting in here. But I attended a presentation a couple of years back in the Northwest by some Americans who are saying that in the next 30 to 40 years, doctors would be extinct. So it got me thinking, as an accountant, will I be extinct? MSCO, I suppose, is standardized processes. If you look at the GRAP standards as an example, they standardize things. Why can't those things be automated? Why can't technology take away, replace it faster, better, more importantly, consistency in the application? Consistency, because we're always complaining about things like capacity and skills development. But always remember, at the end of the day, there's a thing called garbage in, garbage out. So with technology and with what we're about to present, you need to think about bought in, bought out. What does that mean? You can build as much intelligence as you want, but if you give it the wrong intelligence to interpret, it's going to give you the wrong outcome. So if you think you're going to be extinct, fear not. Some of us may have jobs, but we're going to have different jobs. So what you did 30 years ago and what you're going to do 30 years from now may be completely different. So what is that role that you're going to play? I mean, you've seen things like big data, automation, blockchain, artificial intelligence, learning, real-time data. Do we actually have real-time data? Take the data that you get on MSCOR, the MSCOR data strings. How many of you have actually run it and said, this is 90% correct? How many of you are still extracting, putting it into Excel and doing more intelligence on that, and more changes and more manipulation, and then sending it through the system? Those things don't work because the intelligence that A has may be different from the intelligence that B has. But more importantly, the output and outcome that A wants may be different from what B wants. The data source and the power that A holds may be different from the data source and the power that B holds. So how do we then manage this so that we have what I call one version of the truth? And this is what we've done with a product that we've developed called MST, Municipal Sustainability Tool. And what is nice about it, and I'm going to show you its capability shortly, if you look at some of the analytics that's going on there, it has basically taken all of those big words and put it into a single platform. It's got built-in intelligence. I mean, you can even click on a button and get a report written for you that you can send to council, to EXCO, to the municipal manager, the CFO as an example. But it still requires a bit of interpretation. So some of us will still be here to interpret that. It sits on a cloud, so it doesn't matter where you are. In the old days, you needed big floors to have these big machines to do processing for you. Today, you can walk around with this, and it can do 10 times some of the processing power of what we had in the old days. We run it through analytics. We have partners, for example, sitting in Microsoft, sitting in, say, Liquid Telecoms as an example. So you need technology, you need speed, you need bandwidth. Those things are actually there so that you can have the power of what you need to know at one source. POPI compliance. So if you're running things like debtors, personal information, those things have to be secure. Those things have to be kept away from individuals that can manipulate it, change it, et cetera, et cetera. And there's huge issues around some of those things. So what we've actually done is taken all of that and put it onto one platform. We don't replace any systems. So if you're running an Oracle, a SAP as an example, you're running OneSoft or whatever those systems that you're running, we don't replace it. But what the tool does, it pulls the data from that, takes that data, checks it against other data sources, so that at the end of the day, you're sitting and you're doing any analytics that you want, any policy that you want, any resource allocation that you want to do. You're doing it out of one platform, one solution. So if that data is incorrect, if it differs from what you have in terms of the source, and you find another better data source or the correct data source, there's a two-way process that say, go clean that data, or it's sent back and say, clean it. We've had individuals sitting in municipalities cleaning their own data, as an example, to get the right analytics out of that. So you've probably heard of a whole number of services, and you've visited the stands, you sit in different roles in the organizations. Today it's financial planning. Tomorrow it's the budgeting. Then it's the MSCOR data string. Then it's tariff modeling. Then it's cost of supply studies. And there are experts in those different fields doing that. We don't interfere with those experts. But we understand what they're doing. We understand the data source. More importantly, we are able to take that data source, look at the data, and run it in a holistic environment, in an integrated environment to say, yes, this can work, or no, that can't work. So as an example, we were doing something for the Gauteng provincial government, and they asked us to look at GGT, Growing Gauteng Together. When we ran the analytics, we found government investing here, private sector investing on the other side. You'll see on TV currently, there are huge efforts between government and the private sector to start talking together. Not a single one of those organizations in the meetings that we've attended can sit down and say, here's my data source, and that data source manages and meets that data source. So now we're looking at a central repository of that data, and you are the owners of lots of data that you give for free and buy back at 20, 30 times the price of what it would normally cost. But you're giving it for free. So there's power in that data as well. So what the tool does effectively, takes all of the data source, and we run something like 380-something different data sources, provided we had access to it, correct data as an example, and we run a whole lot of analytics around that. Doesn't matter whether it's financial planning and there's an expert in financial planning, great. Whether you're doing your tariff modeling, like I said, cost of study, it does more. So there's a whole range of things. I mean, how many of us here today are still building call centers? How many of us, in terms of customer engagement, for example, are still talking about building call centers, somebody on the inside answering the phone, working long hours, making sure it's a 6 o'clock call or 5 o'clock call? We're still doing it. But things have moved on. But how many of us are getting calls from bots on the other side, trying to sell you a thing or tell you a story? So we've taken all of that, and and you'll see the power of that shortly. Okay? We've taken all of that and created this two-way engagement. Because the core to some of the issues that we're facing is we actually don't know that customer. So we've taken as a starting point that customer, their socioeconomic platform, their ability to pay and not pay, etc., their infrastructure layout, the internal layout of the organization in terms of its governance and administrative arrangements, the systems and processes in there, and said, doesn't matter what you got there. We'll just take it, we'll suck it up, put it onto a platform, and do the analytics and say X, Y, Z. So that's what MST has done. It is one single version of the truth. In some of the meetings that we attend currently, as an example, the presidency has got a certain data source, COCTA has got a certain data source, Human Settlement has got another data source, but they all want the same outcome. We talk about a development state. We're still talking about a development state 30 years down the line. And when they're doing the resource allocation, they're doing it on different data sources for the same outcome. And we wonder why we're not achieving the same outcome. As I've indicated, do we move ahead? Are we still going to think historically or what happened in the past? Or are we going to go through and say, let's look at what happens 30 years from now? So 30 years from now, when we come back to this conference again, are we going to present the slides on the challenges and they're still there? Or are we going to be thinking differently? And that's the question that we need to ask. How do we transcend from where we are currently? So how do we move? I mean, if you look at the evolution of man as an example. And here's something to think about. There's an article that my missus read to me, I think about a week ago. And effectively saying to me, are we not the making of artificial intelligence? Is there no superpower sitting out there that has indoctrinated us to act, think, etc. in a certain way? So think about that. And we're taking all of that, we're actually putting it into technology. And why are we doing that? We want speed, we want agility, we want consistency, I think, more importantly than anything else. And we want one version of the truth. So are we going to embrace the technology today? How do we leverage out of this data? How do we, importantly, empower communities? One simple campaign, and we were talking about it in the stand earlier on, that we did for one of the metros in the country. And you won't believe it, 80% of the individuals that we tried to make contact with was actually deceased. But the municipality is still sending out accounts to the deceased one and wondering why they're not collecting. So it's things like this, and that engagement. People want to call in, there's nobody to answer the call. The call takes 20 minutes before it's answered. You get a response, the response is not what you want. There's no two-way engagement. You're trying to contact Joe Soap, like you may try to contact me. I'm in a meeting, I don't answer the call. We get a number of those calls. But how do we make it easy for that engagement? And those are the things that you need to look at. You talk about smart cities. You talk about digital cities. You talk about enabled cities. What does that actually mean? And this is where MST comes in. MST, for example, currently we're busy looking at a solution in terms of the smart meters and how we pull that data and what do we do with that data. To say more meters, no meters, and where those meters should be, what the tariffs to be, how do we bring it back into the system. All data-driven, all at the end of the day leading to one intent and one outcome, municipal sustainability. But before you even get to sustainability, you've got to look at viability. And there's a number of municipalities that are not viable at the moment. And this is what we tried to look at. We were challenged 10 years ago to develop something that replaces consultants. If you look at my own organization as well, with the power of some of these things, we used to take a week or 2 weeks to do some of them. We can do that in 15, 20 minutes now. Think of what it does. Think of the number of scenarios you can run before you reach the end game or a conclusion or a policy or a tariff for that matter, or a decision to do anything, whether it's infrastructure, borrowing, whatever you want to do, all of that capability sits there. But you've got to work out what you want. And when you talk smart cities, that's not putting up internet or fiber. It's about how you connecting those devices? How are you taking the data from those devices and pushing it into the system to say, yes, this is going to be sustainability. This is going to lead to a tariff that's affordable, that's sustainable. I don't have unintended consequences. But you've got to look at the whole organization, and you've got to have one version of the truth, which is what we're saying sits within MST. So 30 years from today, or tomorrow, you're going to still be saying, this is what happened yesterday, this is what happened today, and tomorrow I have this same chat? Or are you going to be thinking 30 years from now? Like I said, as an example, take this. Take Elon Musk, take electric cars. How many of you are ready for electric cars? How many of you are ready to get rid of your laptops and just operate on your cell phones? How many of you are already operating on your cell phones or your iPads, for that matter? Yeah, I'm seeing some hands up there. So that's the kind of transformation the world has gone through. That's the kind of transformation technology has gone through. But we're still thinking old. In the white paper review, as an example, in the meetings that we've just come off, the cornerstone of some of those things are sitting with technology, innovation. One simple example, I'm not sure, but a partner of ours from Canada is sitting in the room somewhere. That product or service is not ready. That product should be ready in the new year, new calendar year. What does it do? It replaces valuers. You're going to run valuation roles using GIS technology and a whole range of other technology like as-built plans, et cetera, Because when we want to do a data analytics at the moment, and sorry, valuers, you may not like this, we get the valuation role, we get the billing data, we try to do work out of that, but the raw data sits somewhere else, not available at the municipality in most cases. So that changes the game. MST changes the game plan. Have a look at it, come to our stand, and you'll see the power of some of that. But before I go, I'm going to give you the power of something that we just wanted to demo today, just for demo purposes. So some of you may enjoy it, others may not, depending on what you've put on your attendance register, whether it's your cell phone number or your email. I'm going to say, I'm trying to find where one of my partners is sitting, Giannis. Send. He's going to send you something. You're going to get it flying through your emails or your WhatsApp. Go have a look at it. And for the first 5 people that hit that stand today, we will do your financial plans for free. The first 5 one. We'll even do your first customer engagement for free. So have a look at what you get. And that's the power of what we've got. Within a few seconds, things can happen. You can start doing a whole lot of analytics. As National Treasury, somebody at Treasury said to us, it's a system on steroids. But more importantly, we've actually moved away from Excel-based solutions. Moved away from it. So have a look at this. Talk about machine learning. Talk about artificial intelligence. The question then arises, do you want to have a look at MST? Come visit Akhile. You want to look at municipal leadership and has learned from the 30 years and has taken a visionary step into the future with the one data source that you can then integrate and get a view of everything. So the CFO doesn't keep his thing, the MM doesn't keep, the head of engineering doesn't keep, but there's one repository of information. And MSCOR was supposed to do that. We're going to MSCOR 2, I think, at the moment. The question is why? And this is what it is, because at the middle of that is all of that. So I challenge you today to sit back and to think of what's happened in the last 30 years and to say, do you want to still be there 30 years from now? Or do you want to be courageous enough to take that deep dive? So when, for example, we said to National, we should have qualifications for councillors, they said impossible, politically it's not going to happen. So immediately there was a block on it. But then when we sat back and said, what about? So before you think the water is cold or it's deep and it's going to give you a rash on your skin, dive in and find out. So I challenge you today to sit back, think about it, and dive in. And if you want to know more, come visit us at our stand number 63. I thank you.